So I'm going to hand you over to Rebecca. I hope you've kind of know of her by the bio that we sent out. But if you don't, Becca's been practicing since about 1998. She runs a practice with Sasha, her husband, in Brighton. And she's been doing lots of work on women's health for the last probably decade, I think, that I'm aware of, but could be longer. Becca, I don't know. But I'll hand you over to Becca. And like I said, she's going to be talking for about an hour. But if you've got any questions, then please start putting them in the chat box, but they will be looked at right at the end. So Becca, off you go. Thank you very much for being here, by the way.
So actually, before I go into talking more, I'd like to invite you first to just stand up. And let's just take a few moments to just get in touch with our pelvic area. I am actually going to say seated so you can still see me, but that we're going to kind of bring our attention to this incredible part of our bodies just by feeling into it for a moment. So just invite you to stand wherever you are. And perhaps if you've been sitting a lot today, been on the computer, sitting with clients, just shake out any tension that you might have in your body right now. Just ease your shoulders, ease your neck, loosen your hips off, just release any tension you may be feeling. And just when you're ready, just allow your feet to settle sort of hip width apart. And if that feels comfortable for you, just close your eyes for a moment and just take your tension down and down into your pelvis. And for a moment, just draw your attention to the hips, these two amazing, powerful bones on either side of you. Just have that sense of these two hips that are holding you left and right. Just feel into those. And then when you feel comfortable, just send your attention 45 degrees around and feel the sacrum at your back, that beautiful bone that's holding you, supporting you from behind. And draw your attention to your pubic bone at the lower front there. So you've got your hips on either side and you've got that pubic bone and that sacrum supporting. And then just draw your attention to all these incredible juicy organs that are contained within and around these bones, these supportive bones. So there's your bladder there at the front, your uterus if you have a uterus. If you're a man joining us now, just imagine for a moment what it might be like to have a uterus between your bladder and your rectum. And then for those of us that have a uterus, then just imagine that uterus with the ovaries and fallopian tubes. It's suspended there. And then, as I said, the sigmoid colon, the rectum behind. And then within that is all this amazing soft tissue, these ligaments, these tendons, soft muscles, strong, all sorts of different muscles that are interlinking and crossing away the connective tissue, all working together to support these amazing organs. So just have a sense of that. And then as you're standing, just allow just a very gentle movement. Just feel into beginning to take a movement, just feeling all these organs in this part of your body and just move, and they're all fairly compact, sitting in that fairly small space. And then just begin to draw a figure of 8. And it might be quite a small movement, perhaps fairly visible, it might be slightly larger, just whatever's comfortable, but just imagine you're moving through treacle as you do this figure of 8. Just moving, evoking that energy, that attention to that part of our body. And as women, I believe our core, our center is a little bit lower than it is for men. For men, it's a sort of around the belly button area. For women, I feel for myself, it's a little bit lower. So just feel that place of gravity, that place of your center, your core, and a plumb line that draws from there, that goes down into the core of the earth, keeping you grounded, keeping you earthed in your womanhood. And now, as you're in that position, just bring your awareness for a moment. How is my posture right now? Don't alter what it is, but just notice, how am I standing? We'll go into more of this later, but just for now, just experience, what does that feel like? How am I standing? Where is your pubic bone? Just note, where is it? What is the natural curvature of your sacrum. Do you just ask yourself, do you stand in what I would call more of a ballet position, a ballet posture? The one that society tells us to stand in, which is bottom tucked in, belly flat, shoulders back. Has that become your natural posture? Or do you stand more how young children stand? I'm sure you've all seen young children, the posture, and you look at them side views, they have this quite pronounced curvature of the lumbar spine, of the sacrum, and then this the bellowing of their abdomen and the organs that are supported behind it. You can really see that. They stand in what I believe is a very, very natural position. What I believe is actually the way women should stand in order to support ourselves. So just explore what it would be for right now. This is all going to make sense more later on, particularly because we're going to start talking about prolapse and posture as a key part of it. So as young children, we naturally stand in this position. So let's explore what that is. So if you just tip, allow your hips to just tip slightly forward, and it's different for everybody. Just feel, what is that? To just tip them slightly forward. And so allow the pubic bone, this saddle, it's shaped like straps of a saddle that hold us from underneath, and just allow that to kind of tip a little bit further down. And what happens when you do that is then suddenly your bladder, your uterus, this is facing that way, I'm imagining there's a bladder here, your uterus there, your rectum behind that. All of those organs are now suddenly sitting over a pubic bone. When we go into the ballet posture, then those organs start sitting over our pelvic floor, just a muscle, not a bone. And if you're standing in that slightly tipped forward, just relax your belly so that these organs can kind of ease into, your abdominal organs can ease into the abdominal muscles. And those strong muscles are then able to kind of start to take the pressure if we laugh, if you cough, if you sneeze. So just soften your lower belly, just feel like that softening, and how those organs can then kind of ease into that soft muscle, strong but soft muscle. And then draw your belly, keep it soft, but draw it up, allow a lift in your chest, and that sense of the lift from the head up into the crown. And then from that position, then just draw your attention back down and go back down to your pelvic floor muscles. What is that to have them now soft? Because a bone is now taking the weight of intra-abdominal pressure in those pelvic organs. And so now your pelvic floor can be slightly back and the pelvic outlets can come out from there, but they're not taking that whole weight. I'm just going to show you I'll come back to that later. So just feel into that, and right now, what is that to stand in that position? How does that feel? For me, when I stand in that position, I feel really grounded, but I also feel a sense of power. I feel a sense of connection to myself. So this work around the posture comes from the extensive work of someone called Christine Kent. I'm going to refer to her later on, but I just want to honour her right now. And she calls this the well woman posture, whole woman posture. Sorry, whole woman posture. And she offers a whole load of exercises to help you to strengthen that part, so that you can actually hold that posture as a natural way of being ongoingly. Good. Okay. So just to take a seat again, if you haven't already. But yeah, just hold a sense of that posture, and maybe you want to sit down and keep connected to what is it to have your hips just that little bit more forward and your belly soft. Kind of position that we end up sitting in actually when we're sitting cross-legged in meditation. Okay, so from there, let's also just talk briefly before we move on into conditions and treatment. What else are we focusing on when we're thinking about the pelvic cavity? What are the other key aspects of that part of our body? And in Ayurveda, in the Vedic tradition, we have this understanding of chakras. And so in our base, we've got the Muladhara chakra. And this is our roots, our connection to earth, our primal connection to the beginning of life, our sense of our will, our instinct, our connection to our primal, perhaps our more animal selves. And if this place is balanced, then we feel secure. It's a very key part of this, down in the base there. Then a little bit higher up, Swadhisthana, second chakra. It's the place of feeling, passion, of pleasure, our energy of wanting, of living our passions in the world, our creativity. And then moving up a little bit higher, but still in that pelvic region, we have the Munipara, and the third chakra, said to be our place of our personality, the center of our ego, our sense of self-worth, self-confidence. So quite key psycho-emotional influences that are arising from those chakras in this part of our body. And then, of course, from an Ayurvedic perspective, as Ayurvedic practitioners, the pelvic cavity is the seat of Vata, absolutely fundamental, very influential dosha that is based in the large intestine, and a Panavayu that's really seated down in the lower abdomen area. And as we know, a Panavayu is the so-called the leader of the pack, the one that's so influential on all the other Vayus and how they function. So if a Panavata is vitiated, is out of balance and starts to move upwards, that's going to affect Samana, Udana, Prana, Rayana. It's going to disturb other functions. So it's really key to have a Pana working well in our pelvic cavity. So moving on from that, so when our clients are coming to us, my focus is always, in the way that I was taught, is to really focus on Hetu Linga Aushadana. Hetu Linga Aushadana. What is the Hetu? What is the root cause of the imbalance that someone's presenting with? Like tracking back, what's the root of that? Where's that coming from? What is the base that I need to support to change in order to allow the symptoms they have to correct? What are the symptoms, Linga? What is the presentation that they're bringing? How has that particular imbalance with their particular kaya gunata showed up on the symptom level? And what is the Aushadam? What is the treatment? So Hetu, coming to Hetu. And obviously we're looking at that with Ayurveda, given that we're a holistic system, we're looking at that from a physical level, mental, emotional, and spiritual level. What's the kaya gunata? Or sometimes people are coming in, if not, most of the time, they've not told me why they're coming, what's happening there. So as I'm starting to take their pulse and start to look at what's presenting, then what's going to have me think, hang on a minute, there's some things going on the pelvic area, there's some susceptibility, there's a possibility if they don't take care now, things could manifest in 10, 15 years' time. So let's just run through some of those, because I believe before we go on to what to do about it, we kind of need to have that base of what can happen. And then those things, what to do, will also make more sense. So, so for me as a pulse reader, it's always the first thing for me is to take the pulse and see what is happening in Vata, Pitta, Kapha. How is there Agni? Is there Ama? How is there Apanavayu? Is that moving upwards? Is that moving up and then therefore disturbing the other Vayus? Is that disturbing Samana and changing the Agni and changing how the digestive system is? I'm also looking for, how's the circulation to dhatus? How is the circulation of the blood, of the lymphatics, of the flow of prana within their body? How are things moving? Or is there stagnation? Is there swelling? So there's a concept in my lineage of what we just nickname that swell. Is there fluid retention? Like as women, we naturally hold more fluid around this part of our bodies. We will hold that fluid naturally before we bleed, and then we should release it again afterwards. But if there's congestion in the dhatus, in the shrotas, then over time, then that fluid can't flow out again. And women often say to me, no, I feel like I've got this tire around my middle. It doesn't feel comfortable, it doesn't feel me. It sort of doesn't even feel like it's fat. It's more just water. It's just sitting there. So that's definitely going to cause issues. We'll talk about them more. Am I picking up humidity or improperly formed kapha as a result of low Agni? Has the nutrient that's come in been formed into into improperly formed mucus rather than good quality kapha that can help to lubricate things. And as we know in Ayurveda, or just generally, there is 2 areas where we have a lot of mucous membranes, and that's obviously the respiratory area and in our uterus, as in order to allow everything to glide and move and for the ovum to flow, etc. So we need good quality kapha in that area. But if Agni is low and we're producing improperly formed kapha, then that's going to cause stagnation. And for women, that can definitely show up in menstrual issues, clots, heavy bleeding, can lead into fibroids, cysts, all sorts of things that can be going on. So that if I'm seeing some of those things in the pulse, that's got my alertness to like, okay, I need to ask some questions around what's going on down here. So, for all of us, we're always finding out how is digestion working, because Ayurveda has this beautiful, very profound understanding that every disease comes back to starting in the digestive tract. It's absolutely key. And to any imbalance, we always need to go back and clear that area. So how is that Agni, how is that arm, as I've said already. Any operations, now sometimes I will go through a whole case history and ask lots of questions, and people reveal lots of stuff, and then I'll come to, and they've said all sorts of that's going on, and then I'll come to asking just to check any other operations or any operations, and sometimes I'll get the, oh yes, by the way, I had a hysterectomy. Absolutely fundamental to know if that's happened, if you're not able to pick that up in the pulse already, because that's going to have a huge impact on how everything else functions in that area. Could explain a lot of symptoms that they're having, and often because they're coming, those symptoms are arising 5-10 years later after a hysterectomy. They don't necessarily make that link. It's often that link is there. Has there been obstetric birth? Has there been C-section? Has there been any intervention that's disturbed Vata in their abdominal cavity that then has led to other things? How is or was the menstrual cycle? If they've now gone into menopause, what's been the influence on that part of their body throughout their menstruating years? And what's going on the emotional level is a big question we want to find out. Particularly when we're looking at has Vata moved into the lower back, into L4, L5, into lower back, and cause lower back problems. Yes, that can be connected to diet just vitiated Vata and degeneration of osteodarta over time, but I'm also finding in my practice that can have a lot to do with support in someone's life. That's a big topic in itself, but if there's been lack of support and that they've had to do life very much on their own and needed to be very independent and haven't had community and family and a sense of other people at their back, they've had to do everything, do. There's a point where the bone system just can't hold all of that anymore. So that's a key question for me, is what does support look like in your life? I'm asking that to clients. And is there stagnation in their pelvic cavity as a result of shame or trauma? That's not necessarily going to be a question I'll directly ask, but invariably it will come out if someone comes, or I may ask that if they're coming very specifically with infertility or heavy bleeding or various kind of menstrual issues, just to find out what happened there. Is there been some trauma or shaming that caused the connective tissue, to cause those organs to draw back, to hold back, to contract? I believe over the millennia, our pelvic area has become shrouded in shame as a result of society's dogmas and beliefs around women, the religious beliefs around women, the beliefs around menstruation, the shame that is still carried around menstruation is changing, but that's there. And for many women, their entrance from maiden into womanhood wasn't a time that was celebrated. It was a time that they felt contracted around. So it's kind of finding out like what was that experience, what do they hold there, or there may be trauma. Has there been sexual abuse, sexual trauma in childhood or later on in adulthood that's caused a closing? And if we don't find that out, or if we, and invariably, like I said, if it's there, it will come out if they're feeling in a safe space, they feel like they can trust you. that will eventually come forward. But it's important, because otherwise we can give herbs till forever. You know, if there isn't a clearing that happens very specifically on the story that's held in that part of their body, then those herbs may never actually really make a fundamental change to help the healing to happen. And sometimes that trauma can be ancestral, and that's an area that I'm more and more interested in. You know, what gets passed on from mother to mother to mother. So often I have clients with fibroids, and their mother had the fibroid, and their grandmother had the fibroids, and it goes back. It's like there's a story there that's being carried down from woman to woman and woman to woman. And then this woman that comes in front of me and says, this is what's happening, you know, and it's supporting her to come to a place where, like, let's clear this story so that we don't perpetuate it onwards onto the next generation. And we have, there's ways of doing that. So yeah, these are all just throwing those things. I know I'm kind of going quite fast here, but just throwing all these things into the pot there for you to think about as things that we want to explore in our consultation. And then moving on from here to linger, what are the imbalances that present? What are the conditions? What symptoms might show? We're not going to go into detail here. I'm just going to signpost and just mention a few, so that then when we talk about treatment, I can, we know what context we're talking about. So as I've mentioned, menstrual cycle issues, that is going to be definitely a key symptom that's going to, obviously, because the uterus is down in our pelvic cavity, it's going to show up there. So that could be all sorts. I mean, there's a myriad of things that could happen to the menstrual cycle, whether it comes or not, whether it's heavy or not, and how it shows up, what's happening there. Maybe there's cysts, maybe there's fibroids, maybe there's infertility, maybe that's explained infertility. Very often it's unexplained. All their tests are normal, and yet they've been trying for 2 years and not able to conceive. Something's blocking there, something's not in flow. And Ayurveda has a lot of tools to kind of really help in that, I believe. And when addressing those, we're looking at how is digestion, as we asked that question earlier. That's absolutely key when it comes to menstrual issues, because as we know, when rasa dhatu gets formed, the subtissue to rasa is artava, is the menstrual blood. So there's a real key there between how digestion is and how the menstruation will show up. And when we make dietary changes, we can often see within a month or two a real change to how the flow then is. And then pelvic organ prolapse. I've not seen a huge amount of had cases with prolapse, but I was surprised when I looked up the statistics that according to the BMJ in 2016, 1 in 12 women were reported to having pelvic organ prolapse. That's a high number. So it's not something that women often talk about. And that the risk of having surgery for pelvic organ prolapse is 12 to 19%. So that's, again, quite a high amount of women that end up ending up having the prolapse. And often the solutions are not necessarily what people want to use, surgeries, etc. I'll mention more later on. So I think Ayurveda has a real key place to support this. And I have found that some clients don't actually even realise that they have a prolapse. I had a woman recently that shared with me that it was only when she used a yoni egg. I don't know if you've heard about these yoni eggs that come on the market fairly recently, made out of jade or rose quartz, and the women kind of insert them inside the vagina, and that it just kept dropping out. And she said that made her curious, and she went and had investigated and found that she had quite an extensive prolapse of her vaginal wall. So she was unaware of that. And I had another woman come recently, and the symptom that she told me was stress incontinence, and that she was just managing that, and it gets worse when it's windy or when it's very wet weather, but otherwise she sort of manages it. But then when I looked at her diagnosis paper, it said there that she had a cystocele, a rectocele, cystocele, when the prolapse the vaginal, the anterior of the vaginal wall starts to prolapse, so the bladder starts to push into the vaginal wall, or a rectocele where the rectum starts to push into the vaginal wall, so the vaginal wall sort of caves in. So quite extensive, and she wasn't given any support around that. She wasn't really aware that she had it. So sometimes we need to kind of dig a little bit and just make sure that we're really clear if they say there's incontinence, and then refer them for checks if need be. Prolapse is mainly seen in post-menopausal women. It is a vata time, of course, so that is a time, if mixed with stress and imbalance over a longer period of time and vitiated vata over a longer period of time, will weaken the connective tissue, and then things do start to drop or symptoms start to show up. Weakness in the pelvic area or the pelvic floor. So that's where we see it most commonly. Those who've had vaginal births tend to be slightly more prone, and I believe that's as a result of the fact that we've lost our culture of postnatal care, efficient postnatal care. And that again is a question that I would ask in my consultation, like, how was your postnatal care? You know, did you have 40 days of rest afterwards, or did you have your babies and then you were up and back into life again? Did you allow that part of your body to really heal? We'll come back to that again later. So that's where we see quite a lot. The other is increased body mass index, so more intra-abdominal pressure on the pelvic organs, on the pelvic floor. Was there prior hysterectomy? That can create obviously a weakness there. Quite a few prolapses can come post-hysterectomy. What's called a vault prolapse, where the vaginal wall sort of turns inside of itself. And funnily enough, with dancers and athletes, gym trainers, ones that are quite hypertonic state in their muscle tissue, they can actually be more prone to prolapse or weakness in the pelvic cavity as a result of being hypertonic, and not actually the muscles not being able to kind of balance that by having times of being fully relaxed. So they're in a slightly more contracted space for too long, and after a while, obviously that will create weakness. And yeah, as we mentioned earlier about posture, how has someone's posture been over a longer period of time? Western treatment for prolapse is often things like vaginal ring, pessary, radical reconstruction surgery, tethering organs up, which can pull other organs down. And then there was mesh that was used, although there's been a lot of controversy about mesh and the impact of that on women, a lot of pain and inflammation and post-surgery infection, etc. So I think that's less used now, but those are often the options. So as I said earlier, I think many women are looking for a different approach than that. And then I mentioned earlier, one other condition just to kind of flag that this area is urinary incontinence, which may or may not be connected with prolapse, but it used to be kind of called an old lady's issue, but sadly that's actually not necessarily the case anymore, and I'm seeing people, younger and younger people. A woman that came to me the other day was in her 30s with urinary incontinence, so I think it's something we're going to see more in our practice. Okay, so how do we treat all of that? So I'm not going to go into herbal remedies, because obviously those conditions that I've mentioned are all very, very different. And so we need quite different herbal treatment in order to address them very specifically. So I'm not going to address that side. And I'm also not really going to talk about diet, although I will mention a couple of things. Because again, it's going to be very unique to what's presented there, what's the constitution of that particular client, what's their situation, what's showing up, and then adjusting the diet accordingly. So yeah, what I'm going to focus on more are other things that we can do in terms of lifestyle. But just to flag with diet, I think really a key thing to focus on when we're talking about rebalancing the pelvic cavity, diet-wise, is to cut and recommend to your clients that they cut out wheat. I'm talking modern conventional wheat, not necessarily the old ancient wheats, the kamut, the spelt, the einkorn, but this modern conventional wheat that's been selectively bred and altered in different ways that's still being explored, what exactly, but we're seeing that it certainly seems to cause microinflammation in the body if people are consuming a fair amount of wheat on a regular basis. And yeah, it tends to, I'm finding in my practice, it tends to sit in this area. So you get quite a lot of shorter congestion in the pelvic cavity, and all of then affect how the menstruation is. So wheat is definitely I recommend that's a no-no. And any animal milk yogurt. As we know, yogurt has this heavy shandy quality. It draws water towards it. It can congest. And so, yeah, as this lower abdomen being an area where for women we tend to hold water anyway, the last thing we want is something that's going to cause more fluid to retain there. When I learned in Ayurveda in India about the term abhishandi and in relation to yogurt, I was told that if we use yogurt when there's diarrhea and we want to stop it, we want to do that, and it's spiced, etc. And it's a very different yogurt than the stuff we buy on the shelves anyway. It's homemade, but even then, it's used with care. So yeah, something you want to watch out for. I remember a case in India. This woman was being scanned regularly. She had cysts. They were just looking at monitoring her, and she had a couple of scans in a row, and at post-ovulation, so we weren't expecting to see an increase anyway, because she'd kind of gone past that ovulatory phase. So a similar sized cyst, and then on the third day, having eaten yogurt the night before, her cyst was 2 centimeters bigger the following morning. So like that water had just increased the size of that cyst. It was quite an interesting find. So yeah, those are sort of 2 of the key things, plus many other things, but really the diet then, like I said, is personalized to that person, but you're wanting to focus on a vata reducing diet, a pitta reducing diet, one that's going to stimulate agni, clear arm, clear shoulders, help, it's anti-inflammatory, it's going to reduce pitta and heat and help the body to come into balance. I find Mung bean cleansing is fabulous for clearing fluid retention and congestion in the lower abdomen. I use a program that I learned from my teacher, which is sort of 10-day Mung cleanse, of which the first sort of 4 days is the client is basically just eating Mung soup, green vegetables, fresh herbs, herbal teas, and then if they don't want Mung soup for breakfast, then I say sort of stewed apple or a warm green smoothie that they've made themselves with their own greens, with just a bit of apple and lots of some ginger and things in it. So kind of really simple, fairly mono diet over those first 4 days, followed by a fast day, followed by the mand, that particular very liquidy khichdi that we have post panchkarma normally, to that a day of mand, and then gradually coming back again to Mung bean soups and herbs and vegetables or green veggies, up until sort of day 9 or 10, where they then introduce rice or quinoa again, and then come back to normal food. And what I find in that time is that a lot of fluid retention gets cleared, and women feel lighter, feel fresher, feel like they've cleared some of this sense of tire around the middle. I've had a few cases over the years of unexplained fertility who I felt from the pulse have humidity and congestion, fluid retention here. They've done 1 or 2 10-day Mung fasts, and they've got pregnant. It's just clear that congestion. The hormones were fine, everything was there, there's no reason otherwise. It just needed to clear that stagnation, and the Mung bean cleanse did the trick. So it's a potent way. I've also had a woman who was going in for an operation. She needed to have, as a result of very large fibroids, and she did a few 10-day cleanses. The fibroid was too big, and she'd made that decision. She wanted to have it removed. She did a few 10-day cleanses before, and I believe that helped her operations be more successful. And she said her recovery afterwards was very quick. So we can use it in all sorts of different situations. Yeah, and then another thing in our treatment approach when we're giving massages, those of you that are doing hands-on treatments, I highly recommend that in any woman, actually, with any client that comes, that you spend a good chunk of time giving them an abdominal massage. I've had massages over the years where the tummy has got left out, or I've only had like a few minutes in that area and then it gets kind of covered over again with a towel. And I feel, again, as a result, Ayurveda is all about coming back to digestive tract, whatever the condition that someone has. I think it's really key to work in this area and clear the stagnation that's there. Spending, if you've got a 90-minute massage, spending a good 10-15 minutes really working the abdomen, working the large intestine, working the ileosacral sphincter where the congestion can get on this, on this side here, wait, I'm back to front here, on this side here before coming up to the ascending colon, where the small intestine meets the large intestine. So really clearing if there's congestion, getting this abdomen moving. Particularly when there's back issues, that can really help. Also neck and shoulder issues. Anyone's coming saying my shoulders are stiff, then it's often because this part of their body isn't doing the holding. It's blocked, it's congested, it isn't in flow, it's not holding them. So then the shoulders feel like, okay, they now have to do that holding instead, and holding the body up. And if the hips and the pelvic area is strong and it's enlivened and the agni is strong and it's doing that holding, then the shoulders can just drop on top. So yeah, really include a good amount of time on the abdominal massage. And I also show women how to do it for themselves. And I use that a lot in my practice, whether they're coming for a massage or not. They're just coming for herbs and consultation. I show them how to do self-massage of their own abdomen. And that doesn't necessarily need to involve oil or be a part of their whole body self-massage, but it can also be just through the cloth of their nightshirt, their nightdress at night, or when they wake up in the morning, through the cloth, and they don't, the fingers will slide, you don't need anyone. And just, I recommend, just spend 5-10 minutes just working your abdomen, just gently, loving hands, stroking, moving, circling, just feeling where there's places of tension. I find it really gets people in touch with their core, gets them in touch with what's going on inside of there. We've got all these amazing organs all kind of tucked into this fairly small contained place, and you're just giving them a little bit of a movement and a flow, and so waking them up and going, hello. So yeah, invite women to do their own self-abdominal massage as regularly as possible, but particularly with fertility issues, particularly with prolapse, with menstrual issues, really important. And then, yeah, most of us, I'm sure, are recommending self-massage, but really, coming from a place of what is it to do that oil massage, even if it's just a quick rub down, get out the shower, a little bit of oil, get on with my day, don't have much time for it, but to do it in such a way that is like, hello body, just kind of honoring the body on this amazing temple that we have, and particularly around the abdomen, all these incredible vital organs, and just really kind of saying hello, good morning, as part of coming back into our wholeness and connection to ourselves. We spend the rest of the day out there often. Something about really coming home to yourself. Breast massage, I highly recommend that women include breast massage, but again, particularly if there's issues with the uterus, there's a nadi, there's a real energy connection between the breasts and the uterus. You'll feel that very strongly if you've long-term breastfed. Anyone that's done that, you can really almost really feel the flow of that uterus nipple connection. But when we breast massage, and really, working the under the armpit, working these lymphatics, clearing that, and doing a good 30, 35, 36 circles of one breast, 30 on the other, whatever number you want to do, but a good amount, so that you can really feel like circulation is really moving, flowing there. And what you will feel is like down here gets fired up, gets awakened, gets enlivened. So there's, it's just really drawing that connection between the part of us that gives out and nurtures, and the part of the uterus that is the receiver, is the creator of my life, spirit. And we're taking that nurturing energy, but giving it back to ourselves. We're not giving it out into the world. We're kind of drawing it back in, taking it from the breast back into the uterus, into our creative center, into our base, our core, making that circuitry. It can be a lovely way of bringing people back into wholeness. As we mentioned earlier when you stood up, and I just invited you to do this sort of figure of 8. So that is something that I recommend also a lot in my practice, again, as a part of firing up our pelvis. Like, imagine that I've got this fire and I'm kind of, this Agni down there, I'm trying to stoke it. And that may be, you know, putting music on and inviting women, just put music on, sometimes just dance. Maybe get some scarves out, just flow, just dance, feel into your sensuality, feel into your body, move your hips, move your lower back. Find that position, those postures that we talked about earlier. And that's for men as well. We're not talking about male issues today, but just to say briefly that prostate cancer is a growing concern, and as is lower back issues for many men. So, and we're given our lifestyles of sitting down in front of computers a lot of the time, sitting in cars, sitting on trains, sitting. It's just really counterbalancing that getting up and moving the pelvis, moving the hips as they move through treacle, kind of really awakening that part, firing it up. And we can do that. I say to women, we've all got a 100 list of things that would be great to be doing each day for our health. But what are the things that we can weave in where we're doing it anyway? So if I'm on the phone to somebody, it's like, okay, I could stand up and just do my figure of 8 or circle to the left, circle to the right, my hips, just awaken that whilst I'm having this conversation with a client on the phone. Or I'm chopping the vegetables, or I'm doing the washing up, but I've just kind of bent my legs a little bit and squatted and just kind of moved around whilst I'm doing that other chore. So just weaving into the day. Exercise. When we're thinking about the uterus, if the uterus is just post-bleed and the uterus just before we bleed, they're two very different weights. The uterus before we bleed is quite a lot heavier than the uterus before, just after our bleed. It causes quite a lot of blood and extra volume and extra tissue. And if we think about the uterus, it is not a fixed organ. It's fixed at the base of the cervix, but then it's just held by all these amazing ligaments that have this kind of hammock quality and hold the uterus from those different angles. But if you imagine, so that's free, it can move around. So when I have clients that say, for instance, tell me their exercise is jogging every day, then my invitation to them is to think about, okay, hang on a minute, you're in your menstrual years and you're going jogging and putting an impact on this heavier uterus just before you bleed. So encouraging women to shift their exercise pattern, their yoga practice, they're going to the gym, whatever it is that they do for their exercise, shift it pre-bleed. From between ovulation and before they bleed, start to feel into, oh yeah, actually, yes, I'm feeling like my body's shifting gear, it's going into different, I'm feeling a fullness in this area. Okay, so change the exercise rather than having this poor uterus jumping around in there. The strain that can cause long term, not immediately, but over the years and years, if someone's a long-term jogger, for instance, that is going to could well have an impact for how their holding capacity is when they hit their 50s and 60s. So we're talking about long-term preventative care. Alexandra Pope, to speak for the APA back in October, she's done some fabulous work together with another woman called Siani in writing a book about menstrual cycle awareness. There are various other people and authors, there's lots of women who've talked about this over the years, but I'm just going to show you her book. If you haven't heard Alexandra's work, just have a look at this book, Wild Power by Alexandra Pope and Siani Hugo Rolitzer. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This was a total life-changing book for me, or work. I attended a workshop. They've got fabulous workshops Have a look at the book, but also have a look at their website online, which is www.redschool.net. Redschool.net. So I started working on myself and then sharing that with clients over the years, probably about 10 years ago. And as I said, it's gone really life-changing to start to track my menstrual cycle and the different physical, mental, emotional states that I move through each month, and tracking them, getting to know them, and then starting to recognize, oh, there's a pattern here. There's a way that I am, there's a way that I feel that reproduces itself month after month. And starting to kind of adjust, let me be aware of that, let me adjust my lifestyle around that wherever I can. Let me recognize that around my premenstrual phase, there are certain ways that I'm showing up. Those are messages that my body is telling me something. Let me take note, let me listen in. What is it telling me? That agitation that I started to feel, or that inner critic that would arise at that time, what's that telling me? How can I learn from that? So I see the cycle, the menstrual cycle, not as a circle that just goes round and round month after month until they hit menopause, but really as a spiral that's taking me month by month, deeper, deeper, deeper into myself, into knowing deeply who I am. It gives me an opportunity to see myself if I choose to look at it in that way. To recognize, wow, I'm exhausted at that time of the month. Okay, let me have a look. What did I do after my period, or after the end of my bleed? Did I zap my energy that was rising completely? Or was I gentle with that energy and allow it to rise until I hit ovulation and felt my fullness? What am I doing? What do I need to adjust? So that was really key for me. And I believe that the menstrual cycle is a real barometer of our well-being. And the more we work with it ourselves and encourage our clients to work with their menstrual cycle, they will be able to come in touch with their sense of well-being and their balance and shift with that. I also believe that having that awareness of our menstrual cycle and the pride in it, we are changing the shaming message that has been culturally passed down for the millennium, by really honouring our body in that way. And I believe that the menstrual cycle and honouring that and working with it helps to prepare us for menopause, when we kind of reach that crescendo of change, or we're taken into that place of initiation, of transformation, of moving from one particular phase of our womanhood into another. So yeah, that spiral, sort of really working and tracking that spiral. So yeah, do have a read of Alexandra's book. She did do a talk, like I said, back in October. But I'm not sure whether that was recorded. But she does some wonderful workshops, and that she does also menopausal workshops as well. That's been really transformative for some of my clients. Okay, so moving on to that, if you do have clients with prolapse, I'm realising we're getting short on time now. So I'm just going to signpost. Another person I'd refer people to is Christine Kent and her Whole Woman program. So it's wholewoman.com if you're interested you've got clients with prolapse, or it's something you're suffering with yourself. Wholewoman.com. Her slogan is really change the posture, change the prolapse. And she's done a lot of research into the posture and just recognised that the anatomical drawings that we have, that we learn, that is the female body and how it looks anatomically, bone-wise, etc. These are all drawings that have been made by carcasses lying flat on a slab, not a live woman standing. And that we've reproduced those images down the centuries and continue to think that that's how we stand naturally. And actually, like I said, if you look at children, if you look at tribal women, you'll see that they stand in a very different way. And she, like I said, she teaches a whole program of exercise to help women to strengthen that part of their body and really come away from, or shift the possibility of prolapse. So for her, a prolapse is an osteopathic condition. Also, she is based in America. There's some colleagues of mine who are working together to over time, hopefully, will form a body of work that'll be available in this country. That's the information at the moment. But yeah, I think this is an area that needs a lot more focus. And then, so those are some of the key things, I think, if we're talking about unleashing our power and expressing our creativity and passion in life, then menstrual cycle awareness is a absolutely key part of that. Supportive posture is a key part of that. And learning to love and to honour our bodies through clearing the old stories, the stories that we carry that no longer serve us, so that we can improve the health of our pelvic organs and prepare our bodies for menopause. So those are the keys. A few other things I just throw in that I use in my practice is castor oil packs. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. Castor oil is amazing oil, very vata reducing, very healing. It's used extensively in all sorts of conditions as a pack, particularly meant heavy bleeding issues, having the pack over the uterus. I'm recommending we're going to do that every night for at least half an hour to an hour for the first month, and every second and third day for a couple of months. That can be a real game changer for women with heavy bleeding. So using castor oil packs. I spoke about lack of postnatal care. I think really, managing this period. So if I've got clients that are trying to get pregnant, are pregnant, about to give birth, this is an area that I, again, have a passion around, but really emphasising the importance of looking after that phased postnatal, the fourth trimester. We have lost our connection to that in our culture. There's this pride somehow in being, how quickly can you be out of bed and back in full flow again, which is, it's quite shocking to me, to be honest. I think Ayurveda and India in itself that has maintained a kind of real aliveness around the importance of postnatal care, as have many indigenous and tribal cultures, traditional cultures. So that is, I think, as Ayurvedic practitioners, something that we can give a lot of tools and support with, both with herbs and diet, but also belly binding and proper postnatal food, really allowing that agni to come up. Bed rest, the whole concept in Ayurveda of 40 days for 40 years, resting, being horizontal as much as possible for the first 40 days. That can have a massive impact. If a woman's doing that in her 20s, 30s, 40s, it can have a very big impact on how she feels and expresses herself, feels in this part of her body in her 60s, 70s, 80s. So 40 days now for the next 40 years. And that's, like I said, really emphasising massage, diet, bed rest, crawling to the toilet, belly binding, all those different things. There's another whole conversation we can have another time. But there is one website I do refer clients to. Her name is Julia, I'm not sure of her surname, but she's an Australian woman, and she's got a lovely website. It's Ayurvedic postnatal care recipes. And it's newbornmothers.com. Newbornmothers.com. She's, it's an easy kind of referral. If you can say that, just get this book, and it's got loads of lovely Ayurvedic recipes in, if you don't have your own program already for your clients. So I think, I think that whole thing of postnatal care just brings in that reminder of how we've lost our rites of passage. We've lost our times of honouring the transitions that a woman makes from maiden to woman, or from woman into mother if she has children, or into her expression of creativity in the world. We don't rarely come into circles, or many of us don't experience coming into women's circles and having those transitions honoured. Then moving from that kind of time of bleed into the time of menopause, and then coming out the other side of that and moving into eldership. And I think if we learn, if we come back to honouring those, then we can, it clears the sense of shame or congestion that it can be around our pelvic cavity, our reproductive organs, our sensuality, our sexuality, our expression of ourselves as womanhood. And if that's alive, then so much healing can happen. I think there's a real calling for our time is to to bring that in and to look at the ancestral line and the healing that might need to happen from there. You know, what we do now, if there is such a, as we say, there's no, as they say, there's no such thing as time. It's everything's now. So everything that's happened in my ancestral line is now. And if I heal now, then I'm healing the women that came before me. I'm doing that work now in service of that line. So, you know, that interconnection is really, really key. Yeah, I think we're just coming to the end, just as a final thing, just, you know, coming back to the breath, reminding clients at the end of the day, just come back to your breath, whether it's pranayama or whether it's just breath work, as a way of coming back into connection with our pelvis, that we're not just breathing up here in the respiratory, breathing right down into the belly, right down into the broadness of the breath, dispersing that intra-abdominal pressure, coming into connection with the breath.
So can I start with a couple of questions?
Yes.
So I've got one that says, have you had any experience from any clients in relation to breast, uterus, nadi connection that you mentioned?
With clients, I mean, yes, I do have, I've had plenty of clients who I've recommended breast massage, they've come back and they've just sort of like, wow, I just realised I've never really connected with my breasts at all. They're just something I cut off. I encage in a wire mesh. I mean, I do sort of recommend to people get the wire off.
Yeah.
Take your bras off when you're at home, like free your breast as much as possible. And so that you can come into connection. And I have said, yeah, plenty of women over the years, it's just like, wow, you know, that's really changed something for me. And I think, you know, I'm definitely noticing a correlation with women who you know, haven't yet had children, who've then wanted to breastfeed, who've got pregnant, had a child, struggled with breastfeeding, and when we've explored it, it's been that they've been so disconnected from their breasts, they weren't the right size, or they're holding a story around them. So I've seen a lot of women that's really changed that story by doing regular breast massage and kind of going, this is who I am, this is what I have, I'm celebrating this part of my body, I'm you know, bringing it into connection with me. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot with women, doesn't it? We hold a lot of stories. And one of the things I did want to say was that I think there's a movement now of not wearing bras with, you know, the underwire, because a lot of women were wearing that for years, and that has such an impact, but women don't realize that. And you know, because society is telling them to look a certain way or be a certain way, and they've bought into it. So they're doing that. Yeah. Okay.
And there are statistics, just to add, there are statistics around the percentage of women who get breast cancer who wear bras, underwire bras, versus those that don't. They're quite different. It's quite it increases the possibility of cancer quite considerably. Yeah,
that's crazy. Okay, next question. What is your view on pelvic inflammatory disease? Should this be treated with antibiotics, as is standard practice, even without testing? What treatment would you suggest?
I think, you know, you want to be really careful if it's quite in a really kind of acute, inflamed situation. It's like we're not great with acute medicine. Things take time. So it really depends on the case and how severe that is, and whether it's like, okay, look, let's do the two together. I'm going to support your system and give anti-inflammatory herbs, blood cleansers, rebalance, and you can do that alongside if you do need to take other Western medication for a time. The herbs we can will help those remedies to work more efficiently, but also help to clear the residue and the side effects from them. So working together. Or if it's in a milder situation or something that's become quite chronic, then it's like, yeah, let's just dive in there with herbs. But in terms of specific ones, I'm not really able to say, but generally you're using all those anti-inflammatory, pitta-reducing, heat-reducing blood cleansers, and correcting the system with that kind of approach.
And with regards to the ancestral trauma that you mentioned, is it your opinion that it's only passed down the maternal line, or does it get passed down paternal too?
I think it can be both.
Yeah.
I think definitely can be both. And I think it's sometimes I think it's, the family story and how that's influenced, and that particular child as well, and their genetic makeup. So I think it can be both, but it's often, when I'm talking about like fibroids, for instance, that's where it shows up, is from woman to woman. But the root of that could be coming from the held in the family, which could be coming from a masculine perspective. It could be a dominance there that's got passed down from woman to woman. So the root isn't necessarily, root cause might not necessarily be from the woman's side. But yeah, but I think the whole science of epigenetics is now starting to show how much we hold in our nervous system of many generations before us, and that's becoming, there's an awareness for that, and then therefore, it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, when some women say, like, I'm concerned, that my grandmother, my mother had this, am I going to get it too? It's like, if you take care of yourself now, then no, and it's not a given, but there is sometimes that. Yes. Those things tend to come from woman to woman. I think when there's things like fibroids, I do think that's probably more maternal influence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think men also hold quite a lot, don't they, emotionally? So and that can, come from father to father to father, and so all of that must at some point result in some sort of disease that manifests. But yeah.
And also the mother wound that they've received that they then pass on to their daughters. It's like
Exactly.
in many ways.
Yeah. Okay. And the other part of that question was fibroids. Have you had much success with Ayurveda in reducing the mass, or is it just a case of preventing further growth? Would you recommend the fast that you mentioned earlier as the best treatment for patients with fibroids?
Yeah. So mixed cases. I've had, because if fibroids are quite small, they're often not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, I've had a few cases with fairly small fibroids that if they've shown up, it's not an issue, and they're reaching their 50s. They're going to start to go into menopause where the estrogen levels drop and their fibroids are probably going to shrink anyway. But if they are an issue, then it depends on to what extent. If you've got a really large fibroid and that's the site, it's huge when they come, there may be less possibility to do much. It is definitely more preventative, but or like I said, I worked with a woman who was clearly, she was going to have an operation to help prepare her body for that operation. So I'd say mixed. I've had a few clients that have had smaller fibroids, and then they've gone from having heavier periods and issues with them to using herbs, and then not being aware whether they're still there or not. I haven't sent them back to be tested, but they've not had an issue. So yes, Mung soup Mung cleanse is a good tool. Abdominal massage, a good tool. Castor oil packs, dietary changes in general, herbs that help to correct agni, to correct they are kapha-based issues, both fibroid and cyst. Is that so? You're addressing the imbalance of how that kapha is forming, and also the emotional side of it. And that again, like some clients come and they're really ready to clear something on the emotional level, and there is often another story going on there with fibroids, an unresolved issue with their mother, and sometimes they clear that on whatever level, either directly with their mum or usually more doing process work indirectly, and that sometimes can be they're ready, that's the moment, and the change happens, and sometimes no, just a supportive.
Yeah, I think sometimes what happens is, unless you clear the emotional bit, like you said, part of your talk, that you can give all the herbs you want, but there needs to be some sort of emotional clearance as well in order to really get the benefit of the herbs that you're giving them.
Absolutely. We are mind, body, emotion, spirit. That is very clear about that.
Yeah.
Work on all the levels.
Exactly. Right. I've got a few more questions. Can perimenopause and HRT cause a weakness in your bladder, pelvic floor? Mm-hmm. If so, what can you do about it?
Yeah, so, I wouldn't say that HRT would necessarily cause a weakness there. I wouldn't be able to say that, I'm not sure. But I would say that, when I talked earlier about all the different things that can lead to weakness in that area, that possibly if it shows up at perimenopause, then it's been cooking for a while.
Yeah.
So there's been weakness that's gradually accumulated over a period of time. And then as we reach that vata time, that time of quite considerable change in the body, quite dramatic change for some, subtler for others, but it is we're moving into that Vata phase of life, and things then can start to weaken and drop. So that's where it's always like preventative care is so great. You get women that come in their 30s and like, I want to start looking after myself now so that I can take care. My menopause are like, oh, beautiful, love you, come, you know, but that doesn't invariably happen. But if once people are coming at that time, perimenopause and weakness there's still plenty we can do. I wouldn't say it's necessarily, HRT is going to cause that.
So we should be encouraging women to come much earlier. In fact, when we have women as patients, that's what we should be talking about, you know, encouraging them to look after themselves better in that area. And be open about this sort of thing, because I think women tend not to be. I mean, we as practitioners are open, but when we have our patients, perhaps that's something we should be talking about openly.
It's certainly something I do. You know, people come with whatever it is, their digestion and their cough and cold or whatever, but when you become a regular patient, I say, look, okay, you know, let's look at some of these other aspects. Let's talk about menstrual cycle errors. Your menstruation is fine, but let's bring that in. Let's talk posture. Let's bring these things into, because we're trying to offer you a good thing of tools that you can go away with, and they'll be your ballast for the rest of your life. So absolutely.
I think it's important because it's you know, it's a huge part of our lives, and so it impacts on our health. So we should be talking about it with our patients openly. Irrespective of what they come for, because it will at some point affect that cycle, even though the woman might feel that the cycle is fine. And so, you know, what you mentioned about, you know, making sort of looking after your cycle and really analysing it and ensuring that you are following a cycle and not just mentally thinking you're in a cycle. Okay, okay, I think that's it, Becca. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for
and
listening.
thank you everyone for being part of it.